So we hear all the time on our GigTube channels that we watch here on YouTube about how DoorDash and Uber Eats and GrubHub, kind of how they do us drivers dirty and they do us wrong in what they pay us, on what they expect us to do as far as the amount of miles that we're required to drive. Some of the things that we run into on the platforms when we have issues with orders. We hear gig tubers like me out here talking about the problems on these platforms. Well, it seems like the platforms are also having issues elsewhere. I ran across this article today about how there is a class action lawsuit against DoorDash, Uber Eats, and GrubHub because of what they're actually doing to the restaurants also. And I kind of wanted to dive into this article with you today and kind of talk to you about it so that we can see what's going on the other side, which is on the side of the restaurants. My name is John McFall, and I want to welcome you to the McFallRI channel, where I teach you how to make $25 to $30 an hour doing food delivery. And I also teach you how to make online income. So today I want to talk to you about this article that I ran across and kind of tell you what the people on the other side are talking about. So here's the article that I found about DoorDash, Uber Eats, and GrubHub and how there is a class action lawsuit against them. DoorDash has actually been dropped out of the lawsuit according to what the article says, so it is focused right now on GrubHub and on Uber Eats. I'm going to put a link for this article down here in the description if you guys want to go read it. But basically what it says is restaurants had to rely on the platforms to keep going during the pandemic. And this is obviously true because they couldn't have anybody come to their restaurants because the COVID lockdown. So they were hurting for business, and about the only way that they could get business coming through their door was to use DoorDash and Uber Eats and GrubHub. These three platforms in America, at least, they make up 98% of the food delivery that happens in this country. They take care of 98% of the orders that come in on food delivery platforms. There are some other small ones, but they are the big three. And when these platforms go into restaurants to sign them on board, they have contracts that they sign with these restaurants with very specific language in the contracts that determine how the relationship will work between the restaurant and the platforms. And they regulate how the platforms and the restaurants work together. So basically what this class action lawsuit is against GrubHub and Uber Eats is the fact that they required that the restaurants only use pricing that is set forth by the contracts that the platforms put out there. They were required to increase their prices for customers to order on the platforms, but in their contracts they also required that the restaurant do not charge less for people coming into the restaurants or ordering food through any other means from a particular restaurant if they were signed up to use DoorDash, Uber Eats, and GrubHub. So basically what this meant is that the platforms required that the restaurants raise their prices because this is how the platforms make their money part of the way, and they required that the restaurant don't discount those prices on their menus, even for people driving to the restaurants to go sit down and eat food. So basically the platforms were determining and setting what the pricing was going to be at the restaurants, and the restaurants had absolutely no control over it. So this is the basis and the foundation of the lawsuit against GrubHub and Uber Eats. It did not say why DoorDash was taken out of that lawsuit, but when it started, it was based on all three of them, and DoorDash got dropped back in 2021, DoorDash got dropped off the lawsuit. Evidently, they're not as bad as GrubHub and Uber Eats on the restaurant side. So basically the way it worked is like this. The platforms had the restaurants sign an agreement, and there was a no price competition clause that was in those agreements, which basically said that they had to raise the prices for the platforms because they had to pay the platforms to be able to deliver their food. But at the same time, it also said that they could not charge less to customers that actually came in to dine in the restaurants, or change the pricing for any other way that the restaurant wanted to sell their food. So basically what it boils down to is Grubhub and Uber Eats are requiring that the restaurants have a certain price to pay for using the platforms, which meant the price of the food at the restaurants went up. At the same time, they made it so that they couldn't charge lower prices if it was done off of the platforms. So basically the platforms were setting the prices at the restaurants, and there's nothing that the restaurants could do about it. Well, it came up on a class action suit, and the judge agreed with the restaurants that the platforms were price gouging, and they stated in the actual article that they were cannibalizing the people that were actually going in to sit down at the restaurants, because they were having to pay a much higher price, because that's what the contract said when the restaurant signed up with the platforms, and this is not right. So the lawsuit is still going, and they are still working on it. And based on what I read in this article, it looks like the Grubhub and Uber Eats could be in some trouble for this clause that they put into their contracts with the restaurants. And this might be why we're paying an exorbitant price when we go to restaurants now compared to where we were just a couple years ago. The other problem was that because of this contract that they signed, the restaurants ended up losing a lot of the profit that they would have gained otherwise, because all of that profit was going to the food delivery platform. So basically you have the platform setting up what the restaurants could charge when it comes to their food, and then you had the restaurants not being able to make profits because of the prices that the platforms charge them. So basically Uber Eats and Grubhub, and in the beginning DoorDash, was sucking all of the profits out of the restaurants because of the fact that the restaurants had to rely on the platforms during COVID, and they still were trying to do it once the restaurants opened back up and started letting people in. So the judge in the case agreed with the plaintiffs, i.e. the restaurants, and the judge said there is sufficient cause to actually take a look at this a little bit further. And the lawyers for the platforms tried to say that this isn't actually the way it really is, and the judge didn't agree with them. But I wanted to talk to you about this today because we talk a lot about the problems that we have as drivers when it comes to the platforms, and the problems are also on the other side, which is the restaurants. So basically what I'm trying to say is that there are a lot of problems when it comes to using apps to do services, because it's a brand new thing and it's not been around for very long, and they're still in the beginning stages, and there's a lot of stuff to work out before everything kind of settles down and a normal state happens, because there are a lot of challenges when it comes to using apps to provide services, and it's probably going to be a long road and a drawn out process until everything actually becomes, good for everybody involved. And you know, we hear talk about the drivers and what they're doing with the drivers. Now we hear about the restaurants and what they're doing with them. And then on top of that, we hear that these platforms aren't profitable. You hear that a lot. And so there's many issues with the platforms, and hopefully everything gets resolved to where everybody wins. But right now it just seems like nobody is winning when it comes to doing food delivery overall on the platforms DoorDash, Uber Eats, and GrubHub, because it is a brand new business model, and it is something that is new to everybody, and we'll just have to kind of see where it lands. So I really hope that you enjoyed today's video and, you know, took a little bit out of it, because it's not all about what the platforms are doing to us. I think the whole system is, you know, geared towards everybody not being successful right now. And part of the problem is these platforms are trying to become mega companies, and all they care about is market share, and all they care about is growth. And you know, maybe they ought to put the brakes on a little bit and kind of figure out how to do things right, and not just on how to grow. So I want to also remind you that down here in my description I have some great tools for you guys. One of them that I talk about a lot in my videos is my metric spreadsheet. If you want to know how well you're doing when you're out here doing food delivery, the only way that you can know is if you keep track of your numbers. And my metric spreadsheet is a tool I put together so you can do that. And I'm going to throw it up here on the screen real quick so you guys can take a quick look at it. If you look at the left-hand side, you'll see I always put my start time and my end time. This gives me the total time that I've worked. I also put in the miles, and then if you look to the right for each individual app, I put the dollars that I've made, the time that I worked, along with the number of deliveries. Head to the bottom and you'll see that it calculates out what your average dollar per hour, dollar per mile, along with your average per delivery. If you want to know how well you're doing when you're out here doing food delivery so that you can improve your dollars to hour and your dollars to mile, check out my metric spreadsheet and go grab a copy of it for yourself. I would like to ask you to subscribe to my channel and like this video. And I also have some other great tools in my description, which are the Beans app and SimplyWise and QuickBooks Self-Employed. With that, I want to say I hope that you are out there getting the money that you and your family deserve. And I want to say thanks.